Hello, First Assembly. Welcome back to another session of Parenting on Purpose that the generations to come will know. Psalm 78:6. We have covered a lot of ground, a lot of topics, subtopics. This is session number 13, which means it's the second part of the topic of obedience issues that we started in session 12. And let's go ahead and move on. Once again, we have a lot to cover in this session. We have issues. What are the issues in the first part of this topic in session 12? I talked about mostly how parents deal with obedience or don't deal with it, and the consequences of not dealing with it, and how the standard that we should hold our kids to when we think of tending their heart to serve God through the rest of their lives. But then let's in this section look at some of the issues that come up, or maybe the issues that we allow to come up. We all have issues. We have issues in our family, issues in our parenting. One of the things that we often allow in our kids' lives is too many choices. You can see this is from a website designer, but the man laying there, because you walk into a grocery store, especially the super centers, like a Walmart super center or an HEB, etc. There's so many choices. Just salad dressings alone is incredible, the choice that we have as Americans. And think about putting your child in charge of picking the groceries, and immediately you're going to think, yes, they're going to buy, Debbie cakes and Pop-Tarts and soda and that kind of stuff. Yeah, but what I mean is how overwhelming it would be for a child to look at all of these choices. We give way too many choices to our kids. Now, you can take that to an authoritarian extreme, and I'm not, by now that I'm not talking about being an overbearing and controlling parent, but the parents with the greatest intentions sometimes give their kids way too many choices, and the choices and sometimes those choices bleed into the choice to obey, or when I'm going to obey, and we talked about that in the last session. But the issue is too many choices. Young children cannot handle the power that's associated with decision making. Yes, I talked to you about empowering them in a previous session, about how we give them choice and power, and actually by giving them choice, we give them a little sense of power. And yes, we do that from time to time, and that's good for them as they grow up. But way too many choices. The choices of when a young child is going to go to bed, and the choice of that they're allowed to just go to the refrigerator and eat whatever they want. There are some choices in their lives that we have to have a better handle on for their sake, not for the sake of controlling them or creating a robot, but but facilitating a heart that can handle what's going on, that we facilitate and we let go as a process through their life. Also on the screen there, if your child can handle not having a choice, that is when your child is ready for a choice. Think about it. If a child is become prone to handle whatever you tell them, a directive or the food you put in front of them, it is then that you can implement choice. Now, there would be a debate here, and I have friends who would disagree with this principle, but for us to teach our kids to be able to eat what's in front of them is a good thing, because they're going to be at someone else's house someday. They're going to be in a place where they can either show respect or disrespect. And again, people will say, well, you kind of making this a bigger issue than it needs to be. Kids really don't have to eat disgusting things. And a parent will say, well, I don't have to eat gross things. I don't eat this and that. But again, if we are tending their heart, training their heart for later, you can see where, I hope you can see how this is a good thing for them to be able to appreciate the food that sits in front of them, for them to be able to go to someone else's house and to eat what's before them, rather than if at home they're allowed to eat whatever they want or say, ooh, this is gross, and that how does that translate into someone else's house? We've had that. We've experienced that in our family, where we will have company over and the child just refuses to eat, but then the parent allows them to have dessert when they didn't have to have the main course with us because they didn't like what we had. And I'm not going to take that as an offense. Really, what hurts me, hurts my heart, is that the child has that much power. And again, you may not agree with me on this, but I want to tie it back to the idea of otherness, but other-oriented. But it's more than that, because it's also appreciating what you have and what's before you. And I believe that's a great virtue to have. So again, the problem we often have is not giving our children choices, but giving them too many choices before there's an establishment of a biblical baseline or biblical standards, or that they've proven themselves that they can handle obeying. And I look at my grandkids, and if we could sit down with them, there are things that they do. Again, they're 6, 5, 3, 2, 1. And they will, all of them, and I'm talking about even the 1-year-old, they will, when you put the food in front of them, they do not dive in. It sits there in front of them. They wait patiently. When we get together as a family on Sundays, when it's grandkids and kids and maybe a few other people involved, our grandkids will get their food first because it's just easier to give it to them first. But it will sit in front of them, and they will not touch it until we have all sat down with our food and we pray. That's the kind of self-control that my daughter and son-in-law have incorporated into the kids' lives. And to see that kids this young can hold that standard. It's an honor, and it's a respect for the people who are going to sit down and eat as well. But another thing that happens is they will eat what's put in front of them. And it's not been an easy task. And many times this has involved my daughter and son-in-law, just like we did when our kids were young, that they will have to eat that food later. That the food will go into the refrigerator. If you choose not to eat it, it will be your next meal. And however you deal with it as a parent, help your kids to be able to appreciate having food, because that will often translate again into how they determine eating food that has been given to them by other people and so on. And I feel like I've strayed a little here, but I hope you can take these tips and these ideas into incorporating into mealtime and into foods. And Kevin Leman, great author of parenting books, he espouses reality discipline. He talks about that in his books a lot. And he tells this one mom, this mom says to him, I make dinner every night. I have a teenager who won't eat. I always have to make him something else. And like, wait, there's a red flag right there. What do you mean you have to make them something else? Who's running this family? Who's in charge of this family? This idea of making different food for different people, no. This is not a restaurant. This is a family. This is a home. We're going to sit down and eat what's before us, and we're going to eat it together. And so Kevin Leman says, well, what food do they say they don't like, your child, when he's talking to this mom? And she says, well, spaghetti. He says, okay, tomorrow night, make spaghetti. Do not tell him that dinner's ready. Do not call him. Just eat. And so the mom did this. And sure enough, the son comes down and says, nobody called me for dinner. And she says, well, the family is having spaghetti. You don't like spaghetti. You've made that very clear. And well, what am I going to eat? Well, this is what we're having as a family. You have a choice to eat this or eat nothing. And to have that stance as a parent, you have the right to do that. Again, why do it? Because you're training their heart. You're training them in social matters as well. But for you to be able to hold to that standard, and sure enough, in this situation, this scenario, the boy says, well, I guess I could eat that spaghetti. Doesn't look that bad. Don't give in to this idea of catering to everyone in the family and cooking for cooking for one because they don't like what everyone else is having. No. We're going to do this together. This is a team. The team together is on the same page, and we're going to eat. And like I said, with younger kids, it doesn't take long for them to understand that they're going to eat what's in front of them, or that's going to be their next meal. That is not in the Bible anyway. That's not a biblical principle, but that's an effective and I think appropriate idea that I offer to you, because I've seen it work in 2 generations so far in our family. So along with too many freedoms is too early freedoms, and I've already alluded to that. But number 2, they're premature physical freedoms, like a child who's allowed to just go places on their bike, or go or go take things off the shelf, or go into the refrigerator whenever they want to. The idea that they have physical freedoms that are beyond their age. And I know there are situations in families where and kids wander off, or I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where they have freedoms that are just way too much for their age. And then verbal freedoms, for a child to be able to say, I'm going to such and such, instead of may I go to. And as a parent, you're letting go. Yes, as they show trust, that you're giving them more control and more choice as they grow. And so please don't leap there. Think back to the model that I've said of football, that you're a referee, you're a trainer, you're a coach, you're a teammate later in the adult years. But there has to be a process there. And giving your child verbal freedoms too soon gives them a sense of power and a sense of a sense of too much power, of premature power, of being wise in their own eyes, as Scripture talks about. Rather than them just declare to you what they're doing, they need to ask permission. Now, there comes a point. I'll share the scenario that's in our home right now. Jameson, who's a college student and home for the summer, and he governs a lot of his own life. We trust him to make great decisions, and he says, well, I'm going to go here and I'm going to go there. He, out of politeness, out of just respect, he lets us know where he's going and what he's doing. That's great. We appreciate that devotion in his life and that commitment. We also have Christina at home, who at the time of this recording is 15. She cannot just, there are not freedoms in life for her to just say, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, but she has to ask. It doesn't mean we treat her like she's 5, but we do let go, but there's a process of growing up, of handling more choices as you get older and as you've proven yourself. There's another issue in obedience. What about whining? Whining is not acceptable. And as a parent, I encourage you to not allow whining, because whining is it's a disrespectful thing in many ways. Kids will do it when they know it works. Kids will do it when they know the parent won't do anything about it. And I am not saying to squash their emotions. Let them express emotions, but whining is usually a non-productive way. Why do children whine? Many times they know it's an effective way to challenge their parent. They can't challenge their parent directly, so I'm going to challenge them with whine. Okay, you might be saying, well, that's reading a lot into it. Come on now. You know the hearts of kids. You know that we can all be selfish manipulators, and for some kids will just whine because they know they can't say to the parent, no, I don't want to do that, but a whine will work. Sometimes children also whine because they have learned that it works. It works with their parent. It works to, and this starts at such a young age. My daughter was talking about how our 1-year-old grandson will has learned to do this fake like that's not even real. You're just doing that, and she just laughs at how early we learn to try to manipulate or try to get something to go our way. And as a parent, don't deal with that. And if your children do whine, help them to stop. And so how do you help them to stop? Well, for younger children, many times younger kids will whine because they don't have the words yet. Okay, so I'm talking about not speaking yet. Sign language, and I'm sure if you've been parenting for a while, you've heard this and you've seen the power and the value of teaching them sign language for them to I think of early on in our parenting, when our oldest Daniela was just a baby, and that she'd say more and thank you or please, and the sign language that we incorporated, and it was, just a beautiful thing that she was able to communicate and understand those things, even though the words weren't there yet. So for younger kids, teach them that. For older kids, teach them that it's unacceptable. And I have found that one of the best ways to do it is to say, you know what, you're really whining, and that's not okay. I'm going to set a timer for a minute or 30 seconds or whatever it is. In fact, let me interject here. As a parent, a timer is a great tool for you to have in the younger years. It's not just for whining, but for other things, for giving your kids a warning, for them to help understand that, in 10 minutes we're doing this and that. I'm going to set the timer, or you have 30 minutes to do such and such. I'm going to set the timer. Then, anyway, that's a great practice for you to incorporate. I'm not going to go into the other benefits of it, but when it comes to whining, you know what? You're whining and you're fussing about this, and when the timer goes off, I'd like you to start the do-over. I would like you to say it in a way, say what you're feeling in a way rather than whining. Another issue that comes up in obedience are the power struggles, and sometimes they happen when a parent fails to exercise their authority consistently, maybe allowing themselves to be forced into a must-win situation over something that's minor. I remember one time standing in a fellowship hall, and a parent and child come up, and I bend down and I tell the child, I said, "Wow, you look really nice today," and they don't say anything back, and the mom says, say thank you to Pastor Darren. Well, I wouldn't do that in front of people. I wouldn't, because as soon as you do that, you've challenged your child in front of others, and you might lose. And this might be a lose-lose situation. So let that be kind of a side lesson here. If you're going to deal with something like this, you can say to me, who's in this scenario, you can say, Pastor Darren, this is something we're working on. We're going to deal with it. Or you say, excuse me, and you go talk to your child privately and deal with the situation. But instead, in this situation, the mom said, the challenge was accepted. Mom says, I told you to say thank you to Pastor Darren. We're going to stand here until you say thank you to him. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, you're not going to win this. She has decided from the very beginning that she is not going to do this. And so the mom finally resorted to, she kept making deals and making bribes. It's a power struggle right in front of me. She finally, her last resort was, okay, whisper it in my ear and I'll tell Pastor Darren that you said thank you. So she gets down like that. The child didn't even open her mouth. And the mom says, she says thank you, and that wasn't helpful for anyone at all. And I'm not taking a shot at someone from the past or this story, but power struggles can happen because, well, they just happen in life. There are times where a child is going to say, I don't want to do this. This is a good day for me to get in trouble. This is you've heard the phrase, this is a good day for me to die. Of course, I don't mean that literally, but power struggles do happen, and how we deal with them. If there are a lot of power struggles, you need to take inventory of what you are expecting your children to do and how you're communicating that and how you're supporting or how you are backing it up. But when they happen in front of others, just go deal with it privately. Don't accept the challenge. Don't lay down the challenge that your child could accept, because it's not going to be good. And there are situations too where you need to allow your child to surrender with dignity. I've seen parents that they are going to win at all costs, and really the child just is berated and belittled in the process. And you just say, you know what? Even as a parent, for you to say, you know what, I've not done good to hold you to this standard. And so I understand what's going on. I understand you're fussing and whining at this moment. And but this needs to be done. And I'm going to do a better job dealing with it. And you're going to do a better job at obeying in the process. Letting them kind of, again, surrender with dignity, and maybe it involves you having to come back and talk with them. Another issue is rebellion. There's blatant rebellion, or there's, let's just say rebellion is blatant when they cross the line, they really cross the line, okay? But then there's the subtle rebellion when it's barely noticeable, and it's often excused by parents who don't recognize it as rebellion. They'll barely cross the line in order to see what they can get away with. So like in the picture there, the character in the middle is just stepping over the line, and you know kids will do that. You might have been the child that does this, or you've seen it, or maybe your own kids have done it. You say, don't touch that, and they'll stick out their finger and they'll come really close to the item like that just to challenge you. Is that rebellion? Yes, it is. Because they're sending the message to you that I'm going to come as close as I can to that line. And I know your expectation is for me to get away from this, but you said don't cross the line. You said don't touch that. And so, that is still rebellion, and it still needs to be dealt with. And I think it's really easy as parents to look over those kinds of things and just say, well, they didn't disobey me. We're not. Remember, we're not setting up legalistic signposts. We're also dealing with the heart. And you can say to your child, your heart's not really in the right place right now. That you're showing me that your attitude is still really bad in the situation, and that's not obeying. And so we need to deal with this. Don't let those things go by. Another issue that happens when we think of obedience issues is sibling problems. Conflict is natural and normal because we again, I keep saying this, we're sinful creatures. We still mess up. We come to Christ and we understand grace and forgiveness and all that, but we don't stop sinning. But conflict resolution is what we need to strive for in this situation, not avoidance. We don't just send young kids off by themselves and say, learn to work this out. There are times where we do that. There are times that is not just appropriate, but great strategy, great parenting. But there has to be a resolution in the process. There has to be conflict resolution, and sometimes you have to step in. Sometimes it is something that they're going to go work out themselves. When I watch my grandkids, when I watch the 6 and 5-year-old be told, okay, you need to work this out, and hear them start to talk, and hear them to eventually say, will you forgive me for being mean, and that they're doing that on their own because the seeds have been planted in their heart in the first place. But not to avoid it. Parents, don't let this go by. Don't let your kids be at war with each other or hold grudges against each other. Because when there are problems, you can just avoid it or just let life go on. But you don't want those things to build up. You want the loving, caring bond to keep taking place. The restoration in not just to you, but between family members, between siblings. So, and then we think of sibling rivalry, and many times this is created by parents. First of all, parents not being fair. Parents, whether that's because of birth order, you'll talk to oldest in families who often say about how younger ones are not disciplined or as much, or they don't have correction or whatever. And parents need to take it in for, have I really changed? Am I really not being fair? Or maybe it's a gender thing of not being fair. Or number 2, parents trying to make things equal, meaning making, I alluded to this in another session of where we try to make everything so equal that we're afraid of celebrating one child because the others might feel bad. So let's just not celebrate anyone. Or if we're celebrating one, we have to celebrate the other ones, even if it's the child's birthday. Don't fall into that trap. So that just creates a sibling rivalry, because how does it do that? Because children are being conditioned to say, when it's a successful time for one, they're being conditioned to say, well, what about me? What about my stuff? What about my time? And so rather than a otherness oriented of this is my brother's time or my sister's time, you're training them to say, what about me? Number 3, parents not facilitating celebration, love, affirmation between siblings. The things that I talk about in a previous slide, even that having them work it out between themselves, facilitating the process of love and affirmation. One thing that I will often suggest when I'm doing family therapy, when I have an entire family, is that the homework that I give is that at dinner time, that each evening that they will have dinner together, first of all, but then that each night will be a different person on focus. Or maybe even to do this once a week. If this is like totally new to a family and they're not really used to verbally affirming each other, that one night a week will be our affirmation night, and each family member will have a turn. It'll be like one week it'll be this person, another week it'll be this person, and we're just going to go around the table and say what I love about so and so, or things funny and great memories I have about so and so. We did that in our family when it came to birthdays, but I think that's something that doesn't have to wait until birthdays. So again, that doesn't just happen. You have to be intentional. You have to facilitate it. You have to create this routine, this ritual, which is another thing we'll get to later in the series, routines and rituals. Stealing is a huge issue when it comes to obedience, because it brings such distrust. In fact, the two biggest things that steal trust are stealing and lying. But we have to think of stealing in context. Stealing a cookie at home from a cookie jar is different than stealing a cookie from a bakery. Totally different, but yet both are still sin. Both are still an infraction, and we need to judge the motives, what's going on in our child's heart. And our kids need to understand that stealing within the family shames the child, but stealing outside the family shames the family. That goes along with what I said about the cookie. Stealing breaks trust, taking something that's not yours. And this even means that the smaller things when the kids are younger. For one child to say, well, wait, how are you playing with that? Your brother or sister, they were playing with it. Well, did you take that from them? Just even taking it, even something simple like that, we want them to understand you don't just take from someone else. You don't steal things. And as you can see in that photo there, for it to go as far as children stealing money out of their parents' wallet, which is a whole nother level in my mind, stealing breaks trust. And we want to deal with that in our home and not let it go outside the family. Another thing that breaks trust is lying. And this is a big one. Again, we need to think of it in context on a lot of different levels. And then also with these things, we want to work on the opposite. This is one of those, what we really want is the virtue of honesty. And we say, you had an issue with lying, but I know that you can do this. I know that you can be honest. I know that that's something that you can strive for and do it, because you've done it many times. But with lying, we have to consider the age. Like I said earlier, the lie of a 3-year-old is different than the lie of a 12-year-old. Consider the motive behind it. And consider the overall characterization. Is this the first time in 9 months or the first time in 9 minutes? Because kids lie for different reasons. Many times, some will lie to get attention. We have a grandchild that makes up the most outlandish stories, and sometimes even to a teacher. And the teacher the great, wonderful teacher for one of my grandkids will say to my daughter, did you guys do this last week? Or no, not at all. And sometimes lying is used to get attention. Now, it's still lying. And even though it's kind of funny from an outside standpoint that you made up this outlandish story, it's not okay to do, and it's dealt with. It has to be dealt with. Lying is not okay. Now, even if it's simply to get attention by telling a big story. Why else do kids lie? To gain control. Sometimes they lie to get revenge, especially against a sibling. They make up something. Escaping responsibility. Is there something your child was supposed to be doing and they said, well, yeah, I already did that? No, you didn't. And with younger kids or let's say even emotionally younger kids, maybe kids who have been through trauma but emotionally they're younger, they'll give you these crazy lying. Yes, I cleaned my room. We're standing in your room and it's still a mess and you haven't moved anything, but yet you're going to stand there and lie to me. And of course you see that in younger kids. And again, even though I'm kind of snickering through this, and even though this is, one of those sins that I'm sure everyone commits at some time, you can't gloss over it because it's a trust breaker, and you have to have trust in your family. Some kids will do it also to be accepted. Some will do it to balance out parents' unfairness. If parents are being really ridiculous about something or unfair, a child will lie. And then finally, this is a tough one, but it's true. Many times kids will lie because they see the parent's example. Are you prone, I mean, do you ever have situations in your family where you'll tell your kids, tell them I'm not home, or tell them I'm not here, or tell them this or that? You have just told your kids it's okay to lie. That lying is not an objective thing, it's subjective. And some of you maybe made that leap right away to Rahab, right? Rahab in the Bible in the walls of Jericho, who lied to protect the spies. She actually lied. She lied, and then she actually becomes a key person in the lineage of Jesus. Okay, we're not going to use Rahab for every situation, and that whole story has so much embedded in it that she was defending God's people, and she was, all those things. But look at yourself. Do you lie ever? Do your kids see that example of you lying? Because if so, you are handing them a permit. You're saying it is okay for you to lie as well. Another issue in parenting is anger tantrums. If a child is going to throw a tantrum because they don't like what's been said or something that's been done, remember, they need an audience. Kevin Lehman is really strong on this. He is, tantrums are usually thrown because there's an audience. Take away the audience. Leave the room. Step over the child, leave the room. The tantrum will end. For older children, do not try to reason with them, inform them that there's an extra consequence. Like, let's say they've done something, they've made the choice, they've disobeyed, there's going to be a consequence. And then they throw this anger tantrum. Well, please hold them to the standard that that's not okay. Okay, you disobeyed, there's a consequence, but then you chose to react in this way, and so there's a consequence for that as well. Again, in the moment, you need to gauge, is this the best time to approach this? Or should I wait till they've calmed down and settled a little bit more? Anger tantrums are not okay. Now, there are some tantrums that you might have to work with your child through, like a child who is just emotionally, and this comes with age, and you can help them move through this, but a younger child who just has a total breakdown, even though you've given them a warning. Okay, 15 minutes, we're putting the toys away. 10 minutes, 5 minutes, we're putting the toys away. Okay, it's time to put the toys away. And there's just this emotional breakdown. You are doing your best. You're giving them warnings, and they're throwing a fit. And you need to talk to them. That, you know what? I gave you a warning, and you're going to get to play with them again. And you have to judge the motives of your kids' hearts again. But so anyway, I'm just kind of qualifying that sometimes there are these emotional breakdowns. Don't interpret them and come down hard on them if it's simply a young child grappling with this life practice, this life truth that they're going to have to get used to. Okay, and then training our kids how to have kind speech. We've talked about kindness a lot in this series, but one of those obedience issues is unkind speech, whether it's towards you or other family members. And I think it's one of the most overlooked areas in parenting. Even if your home is characterized by kindness, it's easy to let things slide. Especially between siblings, they'll say things to each other and be angry at each other and just be brutal. And many times parents don't come back to restoration or repentance and forgiveness, and so it's just lingers there, and it becomes part of the family culture or the sibling culture. In family work and in family counseling and studies, we talk about the family system, and there's the parent, then there's subsystems, and one of those is the sibling system. And so the sibling system or the sibling culture in your family, you're the caretaker of that. You're responsible for that. So how are you governing that? How are you helping it to be loving and caring so that it'll continue for the rest of their lives in the same manner? And then to help our kids to think before they speak. There's a helpful acrostic on the screen there. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it important? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And for some kids and some children, they'll say, yeah, it's true, it's necessary, it's helpful, And then, but maybe the middle one is the tough one. But is it important to say it right now? Does it really need to be? Do you really need to try to be the mom or the dad in your sister's life by correcting them? That's another thing to deal with as a parent. You don't let that go on. You don't let siblings be parent to siblings when you're right there. Now, maybe there are times where they're helping out with that and they're the older child in the family and you've given them that responsibility. But when they're doing it right in front of you, no. They don't need to undermine your authority, and they don't need to take upon themselves the power of being the parent, because older kids like to do that a lot, don't they? Well, we've covered a lot of ground, as I said, in this second session of, or this second part of obedience issues. Thank you for being part of this series, and I will see you back here next Wednesday at 7 p.m.